Okay, hello everyone. We already have people gathered to this podcast series hosted by Memory Studies Association. Welcome everyone on board, the team who will be talking today, of course, and of course all the participants of this event. So my name is Dovilė Sagatienė. I will be, let's say, will lead this conversation today. I am from Mykolas Romeris University in Lithuania, and we will today talk about the memory issues, various memory issues from different perspectives between the Baltic and Mediterranean seas. So before starting, I would like to emphasize for the audience several technical points, and this is regular instructions for all the participants of this postcard series. So to avoid disruption during the speakers' presentations, audience microphones and cameras will remain disabled until the Q&A session. So as I can see, that is done. Your cameras and your sounds are disabled. At that time, the audience will be allowed to unmute and activate the cameras. The chat features will be disabled, but both the audience and the speakers can submit questions and comments via the Q&A chat. So you can all take a look at the interface which you see on your computer or on your phone. I don't know the device you are connecting with. And try to find the Q&A chat icon, and then you can submit your questions in advance. A tech person is actually also attending this session behind the scenes, so you cannot see it. And that person will be monitoring the Q&A chat in a real time, approving comments to ensure that they are visible to all the participants. And this helps, of course, to prevent chat bombing in case if it happens. And most importantly, the session will be recorded, and audience members provided the consent to be recorded upon the registration. So welcome everyone on board, and let me just give a brief introduction what we will be talking about today. So as I mentioned, the topic of our conversation or dialogue is regional memory between Baltic and Mediterranean. And this conversation will be from very different perspectives, from very different disciplines, because this session is organized on behalf of EROA Alliance of several universities. Let me just list briefly the Alliance participants. So these are the universities from France, Greece, Bulgaria, Poland, Lithuania, Spain, Italy, and Germany. And this alliance is called EROA or EROA. I don't know how to really be on top of the pronunciation, but never, because I heard both versions of it. But this EROA Alliance allowed us to connect this team, which you have, which you see right now in front of you on the screens, because we created a research cluster, which is called Historical Legacies, Law, Memory, and Reconciliation in Shaping National Histories and European Identity. So it's a very long title of the cluster. Nevertheless, the main thing you need to know that all team members are researchers in memory field, but from different disciplines and different fields. So let me just briefly introduce the team members who will be talking today with you. So myself, I already presented myself. I am from Mykolas Romeris University, and I am trained as a lawyer. My PhD is in legal history. Then we will have Professor Giuseppina La Rocca from Italy, from the University of Macerata. And she works actually on 19th and 20th century Russian literature and Russian immigration literature. So the field is literature, basically, yes. Then, of course, there will be other speakers. So Filip Tiunchik from SWPS University in Poland. He's coming from the field of sociology and history of law. Then we will have also Professor Silvia Pierosara, and she is also from the University of Macerata, and her work is based mainly on narrative ethics, narrative and memories, and on the topic of nostalgia, which is very interesting topic to connect all the issues we will be talking today. And last but not least, there is a Professor Ines Stasa from Albania, from University of Tirana, and she is specializing in transitional justice, governance, and her most recent book, actually I want to cite the title because that's, book is always very big event for a scholar, and that book is also printed with Springer, even bigger achievement. So the title is Transitional Justice in Albania, Kosovo, and North Macedonia, a comparative framework analysis. So really, the audience might already see the different fields we are from, and we met today to have a conversation about the creation of authentic commemoration practices in different geographical areas, in different, let's say, fields or country-wise, and of course to talk about the possibility can be European identity created based on memories, since we are so different from the Baltic to the Mediterranean in terms of memory, or maybe not different. We will see during this conversation, maybe we have more in common than we think. So this conversation is also interdisciplinary dialogue, and probably the main goal for us today is to find out what is common between all those two regions like Baltic and Mediterranean, and what is not that common, and what are the implications of that. So without any more delay, let me just give you the final technical detail. The plan is to have a conversation between the team for around 1 hour, because we are here for 1 hour and 30 minutes, and then to have a 30 minutes Q&A session. So let me just start now with Professor Giuseppina La Rocca from University of Macerata. And do I hear something, some sound? No, not yet, because I try to catch any sound I can. So my starting question for you is, how does literature operate as medium of memory in contexts where official narratives are contested or silenced? Can you see the role of literature in memory studies and how you can see it? That would be like very broad starting question for you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Davile. And just let me say just a couple of words of thanking to the Memory Studies Association for hosting us, and of course to you for organizing and leading this very fruitful, I would say, and I'm really sure about it, seminar and lecture and conversation on our topics, and also a very welcome to our team members. Because I think that this team allows us just to share lots of, as you said, topics on the same theme, but from different perspectives. So it will be very nice to also to listen to the other colleagues' contributions about this very wide topic. As far as concerns your question, I would say that, first of all, literature has always been recording the noises of time, of its time. So as the Russian writer Osip Mandelstam observed, so the shum vremeni in Russian, because literature has been consistently fixing historical events and also human transformations on the page, on the historical page, recording both official narratives and also distant ones. So memory, particularly in the emigre literature, constitutes a recurring element, a topos, I would say, that repeatedly emerge to connect the individual to their past, and to their national history. So, of course, when you talk about memory within the literary studies, you had to take into account also the national history, the relationship of each human being, especially those ones who emigrated, towards their identity and so towards their national history. And literature is a tool of memory by preserving, reconstructing, and also transmitting experiences. They are excluded from dominant historical accounts, and this is particularly true when you talk about the Soviet Union and also the Russian emigration, especially during the first part of the 20th century, although we can also take into account the second part of the 20th century, and also the current emigration after the 24th February 2022. And when state-sanctioned histories suppress certain events, especially in the literary context, voices or perspectives, literary texts provide an alternative, I would say, archive through which marginalized memories can be articulated and sustained. And through forms such as novels, poetry, testimonial writings, also echo documents, where, of course, history and literature again cross each other, and also memoirs, literature records subjective and also collective experiences that may not be acknowledged in the official context and also in the official documents. And also literature does not merely reproduce memory, but also actively shapes memory. By employing narrative strategies such as fragmentation, nonlinear temporality, metaphor, and also multiple perspectives, literary works can reflect the instability and sometimes also the trauma associated with silenced histories. And these aesthetic choices allow literature to grasp, to capture the effective and also the ethical dimensions of memory. So fear, loss, resistance, cultural resistance, and survival, they are often absent from institutional records. And I would say that in this sense, literature functions as a site of counter memory, challenging hegemonic narratives and opening spaces for dialogue and reinterpretation. It enables communities to remember collectively, because also the relationship between the individual and also the collective dimension is very crucial within this kind of literature, even in the absence of formal recognition, and to transmit these memories across generations. Because, of course, when you talk about, for example, the emigration, not only the Russian one, but like the emigration and also emigration literature towards the world, we have to take into account that we can also talk about different generations in the framework of the emigration. So a different sensitiveness towards the memory and also towards national history and also towards each generation which is, of course, protagonist in the historical process. And so, as such, literature plays a crucial role in resisting erasure, contesting official histories, and also contributing to broader processes of cultural memory and historical reknocking. So, of course, it is a very crucial medium of memory, and again, which, of course, keeps memory, but also shapes memory. So it's a constant dialogue between these two different dimensions and, of course, among different generations.
Thank you, Professor. I really liked the keywords which I heard during your speech, alternative archives, like, something that is outside the scope
Yeah.
of regulation, of state regulation, yes, because states are always, wanting something, to amend, to edit, to remember or not to remember, and
Yeah,
suddenly we have
exactly.
literature which escapes that, and that's a good thing to know for the memory studies, where to look for extra alternative data, because more or less, for instance, if you come from political science, from legal science, you also look mainly on the regulation by a state. What state does, yes, initiatives by the state, and suddenly you have initiative not from the state, but somewhere else, from the, how to say, from the creativity of you,
Sure.
of a person.
Yeah.
So I want to ask a follow-up question on that.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder, in your practice, because you're already for some time in this field, and you know very well this field, from your practice, what main narratives you were able to see in, for instance, in Russian emigre literature? And when we talk about Russian emigre literature, we probably talk about the emigre literature in 20th century, yes? Or a
Yes,
broader, what is
basically,
the scope of the
yeah.
research?
So when we talk about Russian emigration literature in the 20th century, because basically the phenomenon is concerned the 20th century. If we think about emigration as a very wide phenomenon, which involves of course, the intelligentsia, and also in terms of relationships between intellectuals and also the identity, so the national identity. Because, of course, in the 19th century and also in the 18th century, we had some kind of, not emigration, but anyway, some kind of processes, which, of course, the historiography called not immigration, but tour, for example. So when noble families came to Europe, and also towards Europe anyway, just to be educated, to attend also universities and also the different courts. So a very vivid cultural panorama. But that is another phenomenon which we cannot, also from the point of view of the historiography, call emigration, but basically grand tour. So it's something very different. If we talk about emigration with a particular focus on Russian one in the 20th century, we have to take into account that we have different waves, because, of course, just a little bit before the October Revolution in 1917, and also after the 1917, and then we have the first wave, so the very crucial one, within which we can also divide and also outline two different generations. Then we have the second wave, which can be considered from the, let's say, until 1945, so until the Second World War. Then we have the third wave from the end of the Second World War until the 80s. The fourth wave from the 80s until the let's say the very beginning of the 21st century. And then we have also a fifth wave, which can be considered the wave from Russia towards Europe and also states after the Russian invasion in Ukraine, so after the 24th February. We have basically five different waves, which of course have common mutual elements. If we talk about the very first wave, so the first part, the first half of the 20th century, we have these two different generations, which of course have a different relationship towards their own past, which means like the 19th century, but also the Russian Revolution.
Mhm.
So in this first wave, intellectuals, that is to say, writers, artists, generally speaking, they also had the hope to come back to Soviet Union. So they thought, and they were pretty sure that the Soviet Union was just a very close, or anyway, very short experience, which they could overcome, which history could overcome. And so they had this hope to come back to Soviet Union, but actually they didn't, or basically most of them remained in Europe or to the States, or anyway moved to the States. And so this first generation has a kind of somehow anger towards their own national history because of the Bolshevism, But on the other hand, they had the hope to come back to their great Russia, which was the idea of identity. And so, how to shape identity in a different context, which we, intelligenti, so writers, artists, hope to be like a different dimension, a different word from the Bolshevik one. And the second generation, on the other hand, had anyway different perspectives, because like if we think about perhaps one of the main famous popular authors in Europe and the States, Vladimir Nabokov, we can see and we can also read, if we think about also Lolita, which actually is not a story about emigration, but so it's something completely different. Of course, Nabokov was like a privilege, has the privilege to be, let's say, to belong to a very rich family. So he has always moved in Europe. So he started in Great Britain, into the States, then he went to Berlin before in Germany. So anyway, it was like he had a cosmopolitan, let's say, culture, and his relationship towards Soviet Union, or anyway the Soviet history and the Soviet past, was completely different from those authors who belong to the first generation. So if you also read, for example, The Gift, his last novel written in Russian, The Gift in Russian is dar, because dar has the two letters da, which means yes, so yes to life. So the emigration is an opportunity. You don't have to close yourself in the past, but you have the opportunity to build another future up, and it's up to you. So this is a very positive role of memory, when memory does not close the emigrant in a capsule. So, and also Brodsky, for example, another very important example of Russian immigration literature, talked about the language as a capsule, so as a very close place where the emigrant somehow closes himself, not to have any kind of contacts with the world outside.
Yeah, thank you so much for this detailed answer. And again, I heard the words which are very much connect our conversation with next speaker, Professor Philippe Tionchik, because you mentioned very interesting words, Great Russia, the narrative of Great Russia, which was really embedded probably in all, more or less in all emigre literature during the decades, probably. This is my guess, more or less. Yes, sometimes more, sometimes less, but nevertheless, those people who left Imperial Russia, those people who left then Soviet Union, yes, escaped Soviet Union, they were forced, some of them forced to escape. They for a very long time, for the, at least for the endurance of the Soviet Union, they lived like in a shadow of Russia, of Russian Empire, of Russia, of Soviet Russia. And there is, of course, another statehood, another country, which is situated across the Baltic Sea. And I am talking now already about Poland, which had not completely different memories about Soviet Union, but these memories are again contradicting some narratives which are expressed, for instance, in Russian émigré literature about probably the Great Russia. And that's why I want to now to give the floor for Professor Tionchik, and to ask him, probably the question would be like this: what is the memory politics of Poland, looking from your perspective, from the perspective of law or of legal sociology, to that great Russia narrative, or to the narrative of superpower of Soviet Union? Because Soviet Union after World War II a little bit amended the narrative of Great Russia, and Great Russia became Great Soviet Union in some sense. So I would like to just, Professor, to break it, how it looks in different field some of those narratives. The floor is yours now.
Okay, good evening. Welcome everyone. I also, at the beginning, I would like also thank you for the Memory Studies Association to host us with that discussion. And I would like just to add that, well, my perspective is not only Polish, because at the moment I'm sending you very warm greetings from the very freezing Riga. So I'm even more on the north in Baltics. However, well, Dovile, the question is about the Great Russia, Great Soviet Union, and actually the merge that concept under Putin, because we can speak about the merge and we can speak about the routinization of or Russianizing the Soviet Union together with Stalin 30s, 40s, so-called Great Motherland War and the other events. But it's a more question about the narrative and the current memory politics and some measures implemented when after Russian aggression, more about the, let's say, ad hoc measures than the current legal policies, because there is no direct legislation which is openly negative to Russia in Poland. Moreover, even in country where I am, so Latvia, which suffers like much higher and much more complicated relations with not only Russia as a state, but with so-called Ruski Mir, so the representative of the Russian world who are there, who are sometimes stereotypically treated as very influential group, but never in the legal, but when we implement legal measures shaping collective memory, we cannot, according to my experience, it's really hard to say that we can directly identify some concrete means oriented against concrete state or concrete group. We can identify the means used against concrete ideology. And it's quite visible in Polish constitution. It's Article 13 of Polish constitution. So the ban of associations which refer directly to the Nazi and communist regimes. We can see that in preamble, but always in case of law, at least at the constitutional or declaration level, those narratives are not directly oriented against. Even if they are against, we need to decodify that from internal knowledge and from the internal context. And it's like a first answer, how the law shapes collective memory, because the problem is very complicated and the answer is very legal. It depends. So its classic legal answer, it depends. It depends of mainly the context and the paradigm we are located in. So should we take a look at law and its relation to collective memory in the classical terms? So the nationhood that use the law as the most, as Professor Wronkowska from University Poznań defined the instrumentalization of law. Why the law was instrumentalized? Because it's the only mean that government possess, and at the same time, it's a mean highly affecting society according to its instrumental character. And of course, I don't want to go deeply into these studies on instrumentalization of law. Nonetheless, it's the answer about what kind of processes we are talking about. Is it a paradigm of the classic nationhood, or maybe we speak about the nowadays contemporary constitutional liberal democracy that, next to some old communitarian narratives, also represents mainly deep devotion and is declaring in the same preamble where they declare memorization. They also declare deep devotion to individual rights, human rights, rule of law, Western universalism, etc. And you can find it in any preamble, in maybe not in the first wave. Now I'll be following Chris Thornhill, the British social legal scholar. So maybe not directly in the first wave of constitutions, so German, Western German and Italian, but from the other side. Look at the German preamble to the German now federal constitution. They want to be equal, peaceful member of the international community. Of course, the preamble drafted and changed. But then we have a second wave, same in Spain. We have we don't have memory narratives, but we have reference to the rule of law and these universal values. But in Portuguese constitution, we have direct reference to the political moment and the revolution, changing the political regime in Portugal. And we can go through Europe like that all over. And now the third wave of constitution, even those constitutions which had no preamble or had no memory narratives, together with the amendment process, they get it. Latvian is the youngest one, but in 2003, very significant change has happened in Romania. So Romania is not only rule of law state, and so, also it's a rule of law state following the principles of social solidarity, but in the spirit of democratic traditions of Romanian Revolution 1989, whatever it means. And now, okay, if it is unofficial talk, but still, I don't want to suggest what kind of implications it may create for the future dictators. So, well, so the question is very open. For sure, law plays even in liberal democracy, law sometimes plays secondary role to the politics and some political decision. So, because in classic terms, law was a mean. Hobsbawm, Connerton, it is well described. Anderson, it is not well described. It's not a time to do that. How the states been shaping collective memories by laws, same what Josefina said, and how the states been keeping or trying to preserve the expected narratives by using the law. Public ceremonies, public schools, commemoration in the public sphere, Connerton and his beautiful explanation in the book how the societies if I'm not wrong, how the societies remembers. So this year of the Third Reich, yes, memorizing, celebrating, very still secular, but very religious in its character, repetition of memorizing. But the situation has changed. Yes, the situation has changed together with triumph or hope of constitutional liberal democracy. And now individual rights from one side, from the other, still, especially in Central Europe, the attempt still to shape the community and to create some symbolic framework of coexisting, symbolic framework of co-remembering. So going into this direction, of course, constitution is the first level, but the memory laws, concrete memory laws, are also, they might be the consequence, and sometimes they are presented as a logical consequence of this declaration of memorizing, following Pshiban, following Luhmann, all those mythical foundations of concrete political community located in constitutional preamble. Then they are operationalized, they might be institutionalized. And we have that, yes, we have extremely overbuilt the Institute for the National Remembrance in Poland. After 22, in Lithuania, you had very profound amendment of law on the memory center, actually Center for the Resistance and Genocide of the Lithuanian citizens. I told you that when I read that amendment, it's in big parts in copy-paste from the Polish Institute of the National Remembrance. Yes. They're copying institutional arrangements. So the states are doing that, but very significant is the direction. If Josefina said that all these processes of Russian migration, shaping Russian migration, collective memories were bottom up, the states always operates top down. Even if not at the beginning, always reacts top down. Why? Even if some narrative occurs bottom up, even if some idea of memorizing concrete group, like in case of Poland, the doomed soldiers, the condemned soldiers. Yes, I mean post-war anti-communist underground. They were not present in the agenda, memory agenda in 90s. They appeared in the second decade of 21st century. They replaced Warsaw Uprising soldiers. So it is like changing and balancing the memorizing concrete groups. This is the memory politics, and it is juridified. But at the end, the state shapes the way of memorizing and shapes the way how they use this narrative, and also organize the whole legal infrastructure to preserve that. Yes, so to keep and to maintain, to preserve and to reproduce.
So that was actually you almost answered my second question to you, follow-up question for you, because you were mentioning many times direction. what is the direction of memory regulation, not only from Poland, but in general in our region, because you mentioned in the beginning of your presentation that it is not against Russia. It is not against any.
It is against Russia,
But
but however, it's not directly articulated in law and has never
yes.
been.
So
Any attempt to directly regulate any memory to juridify directly were ending up only by one thing, by memory conflict with the concrete state. It happened with Ukraine in 2016 after amendment of law on National Institute for the National Remembrance, when where was openly written the crimes committed by Ukrainian nationalists in Eastern Galicia, and it was taken out by Polish Constitutional Court. So in its
so
ruling, Constitutional Court found this term inadequate to the rule of law principles. So, okay, it's not directly against the concrete states, but indirectly. If we know the context, what I said at the beginning, if we know what is written behind the will of ignorance, we know what the state want to tell us. It's like in the Declaration of Independence of the State of Israel, which is play quite opening role in the catalog of Israeli constitutional acts. They're not saying we, the Zionists, we are condemning Holocaust, and we say that Holocaust would not happen if you listen us and go with us to Palestine. But it's written that they are saying about the tragedy of millions of Jews in Europe, which clearly shown that it's a time to build the state of Israel.
yes, of course, it's the art of wording and the art of expressing in many ways, and also in constitution by the provider of laws. But can we just wrap up a little bit your presentation? Can we claim, and to what level can we claim that the direction is to preserve and to protect national identities which are in a shadow of bigger countries? It's not necessarily about Russia, because we straight away started from Russia because this is our expertise within the field. But nevertheless, it can be, in any part of the world, not only even in Europe. Can we say that all memory laws, all memory regulation is more designed to the direction to protect national identities than to to attack any other great bigger country next to those smaller countries? What do you think?
Well, again, it depends. So in case of the nations that were in the physical threat they faced the physical threat of existence, the smaller they were, the more they faced the physical threat of their real existence. And I don't speak only about, I don't know, mass deportations, genocides, and the things like that, but I speak about, for example, being like Baltics, being under the occupation, where on their territories, some policies been implemented even in favor of the people living there. I speak about the Brezhnev, for example, Brezhnev era promotion of so-called national federal language. Yes, federal language meant Russian, because they said that they did the research and there was a claim that citizens of the Soviet Union who are not Russian speakers, they don't know state language, so they have a problem with execution of their equal rights. Yes, wording matters. In case of the bigger nations, it's quite complicated, because, for example, it's the easiest answer. There is also the other answer, that we have like bigger communities, but maybe they are not afraid of their physical existence or the existence of their language, their culture, and the things like that. But still, they're afraid of the other kind of processes. If they're so self-confident that they're not in the physical threat, they are easy target for globalization. So, for example, it might be also preserving the essence of national community. I don't want to say national identity, because I don't like that term as a closed and narrowing, but some form of togetherness based on the same code from also the threats coming from the other directions like globalization. So it really depends. And if you ask me as a Polish scholar, I would say, no, in Poland it was rather created to protect the essence from the globalizing processes. But if you ask me as a part-time Latvian scholar, I would say, yes, you are right.
Okay, thank you so much, Philip, for your input. And let us move now to our third speaker, Professor Ines Stasa from Albania. And of course, I want you to brag about your book a little bit. And then I want you to ask the question on how do post-authoritarian societies in Southeast Europe confront unresolved past injustices through memory? Because you are really the representative of that part of Europe, and I'm afraid that as you know, Baltic scholars are very much concentrated to their own field. That would be very interesting for you to hear from you what you have to say from another region, from Mediterranean region. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Deville, and thank you to the Memory Studies Association for having me today. It is my honor to be part of this amazing and wonderful panel of scholars. First of all, thank you, Deville, for launching my new book. Well, this is my book. It was a part of my PhD dissertation, Transitional Justice in Albania, Kosovo, and North Macedonia in a comparative framework analysis. This book is based on 44 elite in-depth interviews in Kosovo, Albania, and North Macedonia, based on different layers such as politicians, representatives from politics, academia, civil society, and media. Well, I will attach some of the main findings of the book, as well as one of the recent public surveys that I have conducted last year, supported by the International Commission of Missing Persons here in Albania. Let's say that is one of the largest public surveys ever conducted here in Albania, with 1,200 respondents. Based on public perceptions that Albanians have on communist past and on missing persons. And within this public survey, I have designed a very particular section on historic education and memory. Since memory in Albania, as you well might know, it is a very under-researched area. So as a transitional justice scholar and keen on the field, I was very interested to open this Pandora box and see and look through and delve through the public perceptions of Albanians. So first of all, I would like to say that, well, February as a month marks two defining moments in Albania's 20th century memory, since on 20 February 1991, it was the fall of Enver Hoxha's statute in Tirana that became a powerful public signal of the collapse of communist authority and the beginning of Albania's democratic transition. And just days later in the calendar, but 4 decades earlier in history, in 26 February 1951, we recall the execution without trial of 22 Albanian intellectuals, which define a stark symbol of state terror and political repression at the height of the dictatorship. Even though memory in Albania is always, let's say, a field or a space of polarizing the society, and these two symbolic days and very important days, which will be very good at defining our memory. They are not national, official, remembered within the society. So based on my comparative research in the 3 countries, as I mentioned before, and to my recent empirical work, my core argument to this will be that memory and transitional justice, and today I will be speaking mostly on transitional justice as as a tool, and let's say memory as a mechanism for as a guarantee of non-recurrence of repression and dictatorship. So memory and transitional justice are not only about the past, but they also are deeply political processes that shape democratic legitimacy, social trust, and European integration today. Since we as Albanians and mostly the Western Balkan countries are really keen and committed to the European integration process lately. So post-authoritarian societies in Southeast Europe do not confront a single and clearly bounded past. Rather, they face very different, layered, overlapping, and unfinished transitions. Let's say in which different forms of injustice coexist and remain only partially addressed. So this condition fundamentally shapes how memory and transitional justice unfold across the region. In Albania, for instance, the transition, which is part of my book also, is defined primarily by the legacy of communist repression. Political imprisonments, executions, forced labor, extensive surveillance, and the systematic denial of civil and political rights. Meanwhile, on the contrary, in Kosovo and North Macedonia, by contrast, they confront a double transition. So alongside post-communist transformation, they must also address post-conflict justice, including wartime atrocities, displacement, missing persons, and unresolved inter-ethnic divisions. So these distinct historical trajectories generate, in my book, what I conceptualize as overlapping transitional justice agendas. So within this framework, core components of transitional justice, such as mechanisms of truth-seeking, criminal accountability, reparations, institutional reform, and guarantees of non-recurrence, rarely unfold sequentially or in a mutually reinforcing manner, which means they frequently move out of sync, competing for political attention, institutional capacity, and symbolic legitimacy. So there is a misalignment of not merely technical, but it reflects a broader political economy of post-authoritarian governance in which the past is repeatedly mobilized in contemporary power struggles, and it is always a motivation for political parties to confront each other in terms of being communists or anti-communists. So a central comparative finding of my research is that across Southeast Europe, mechanisms are present. So we have laws of lustration in Albania, laws of lustration in North Macedonia. We have a special court in Kosovo, and well, Kosovo, let's say, that is a more, let's say, has been more developed and more committed on transitional justice processes and mechanisms compared to Albania and North Macedonia. But still, strategies are absent in all the countries. So archives have been opened to varying degrees because we do not still have access on public dossiers of former communist or Sigurimi collaborators. Illustration and vetting laws have been adopted, persecutions have occurred, and memorialization practices have emerged. But yet, these measures are seldom embedded within a coherent, single, and long-term state policy on dealing with the past. So they tend to fragmentize more the society, to politicize more the society, and selectively be implemented. So often activated during moments of political competition rather than sustained as institutional commitments grounded in democratic norms. So this structural diagnosis is strongly reinforced by the empirical research that I talked about on public perceptions. Survey data reveal a pronounced gap between societal expectations and institutional performance. So when asked whether Albania has sufficiently addressed the crimes of the communist regime, only 27% of respondents responded affirmatively. So this low level of approval signals a widespread perception that transitional justice remains incomplete and that the state has not fully assumed responsibility for confronting its authoritarian and dictatorship legacy. At the same time, the data demonstrates consistent societal demand for memory and recognition. So approximately 70% of respondents support the creation of national memorials or museums dedicated to the victims of communism. We still in Albania do not have national memorial to commemorate the victims of communism. So this finding is particularly significant as it challenges the assumption that public engagement with the communist past is declining or confined to specific social groups. So instead, it suggests that remembrance enjoys broad legitimacy and constitutes shared moral expectation, even though the state mechanisms or let's say political willingness is not as broad as the public. However, these demands let's say coexist with profound informational and institutional deficits, as you might understand. So 64% of respondents reported having little or no information about efforts to locate and identify the remains of individuals who disappeared under the communist regime. So 64% who have no information or having little about efforts on missing persons during the communist regime. So this lack of visibility undermines, of course, institutional trust and reinforces perceptions that transitional justice processes are opaque, inaccessible, or largely symbolic. It also points to a failure of state communication and public engagement. So taken together, let's say that these findings reveals a critical tension at the heart of post-communist or post-authoritarian memory politics in Southeast Europe. Engagement with the past occurs inconsistently. Memory stays socially active, but through informal networks, which means memory, it is maintained through family stories, informal remembrance activities, especially organized by civil society groups, and by public conversations, but it is also institutionally scattered. So memory policies and memory dialogue is not enhanced by the political space, by the political engagement, but also through, let's say, in my survey, and I will share it with you right now, some findings about the young people, because you will see one of the most interesting findings that fewer than 1 in 5 young people said that they would like to live in a communist regime. And we are talking about 2025, less than a year.
Nostalgia.
Yes, and I will talk about that in a minute. So without clear public policies and ongoing political will, memory is susceptible to politicization, selective use, denial, or nostalgic reimagining. So this explains. Yes.
Can I ask follow-up question? Because it's very interesting that you are presenting a lot of numbers, and this is sociological also research, because you got interviews, you got numbers, you have a very, let's say, hard data, yes, on what you were exploring. But there is an elephant in the room, because I want you also to explain a little bit what was your rationale to compare Albania, Kosovo, and North Macedonia. I suspect what is the rationale, but it would be very useful if you could explain a little bit why these three countries needed to be compared, beside the geographical closeness, of course, but nevertheless, what are the other features why you connected these 3 countries? Because not all of them had identical pasts or traumas, yes?
Of course.
So let's beat that elephant in the room, because that's important to understand. Thank you.
Yes, but please, Dovile, first, I would like to share some of these findings,
Okay.
because these findings are really interesting, because these large public surveys are not so usual or common in Albania. So this, let's say, give a snapshot on Albania and public perception on the communist past. So please let me share with you right now some of the findings, and then I will
Fantastic.
get back to, yes, to why a comparative approach with Albania, Kosovo, and North Macedonia. So in a second,
It works. Yes.
you see?
Yes, we can see the text.
And the highlighted, you see?
Yes, and we can see highlighted in violet, in purple color.
Yes. So some of the findings. So although collective memory is active, there are still informational and narrative gaps that require educational and institutional interventions. And the perception of the communist past is generally negative, especially regarding human rights violations, isolation, and repression, while free healthcare and education, along with infrastructure development, are mentioned as positive aspects, particularly by older generations. And 70% of respondents support the creation of a memorial or museum for the victims of communism. And 66% of citizens express some interest in learning more about the communist regime, offering real space for new educational, cultural, and media initiative. Democracy remains the clear choice for the majority of citizens, which is encouraging for further democratic development. However, about 1 in every 4 respondents will prefer to live under communism, a signal that collective memory is not unified, and that the lack of full confrontation with the past may have created space for this idealization and nostalgia of the former system. So this specific part on historical education and memory, let's say, indicate a very specific information that it is very important for us in Albania to, let's say, confront the past and develop memory policies, since we lack memory policies and we lack full engagement of civil society and the political willingness to further develop and to create memory, or to transform memory, not as a space for polarization, but memory as a space for recognition of the communist trauma and the communist past, which memory should be something that join us or make us together, not to divide us. So why a comparative approach? At first I was, when I chose to study transitional justice, it is a very underdeveloped research and field of study in Albania. So I took this as an innovative idea to be the first one in Albania as a scholar to bring a book about it. And this is, let's say, a full history and development of transitional justice mechanisms since 1990 to 2023. So this is, let's say, the period that I have been studying and researching on my book. And then I said that I need to bring not only an innovative idea, but also a comparative one, in order to attach Albania with other, or to study Albania in a larger scale. So since Albania is under-researched, especially within the Western Balkan history when it comes to war crimes, communist past, dictatorship, etc. And we have a lot of studies and researches on Kosovo especially, and on Bosnia and Herzegovina and on Serbia, and few of North Macedonia. So since these three countries are border countries with each other, mostly ethnic Albanians, and I took this initiative, let's say, to compare transitional justice in these three countries, but also because I wanted to see how a post-communist country would implement differently a transitional justice mechanism in contrast with a post-conflict country. So Kosovo and North Macedonia are also post-communist countries and post-conflict countries. And in contrary, Albania is only a post-communist country since we have not suffered ethnic issues or, let's say, other war crimes like inter-ethnic divisions like in Kosovo or in North Macedonia. So I wanted to see the differences, but I wanted also to touch Albania with these two countries that have suffered from the communist and conflict settings.
Thank you so much. That was really nice to hear a lot of data, recent data, yes, because the book was released this year, I assume, or last year, December. So nevertheless, probably that is very that research contains a lot of novelty in comparative terms and also in sociological terms. And of course, probably one of the most interesting ideas I heard from you is that you lack memory policies and society is expecting more intervention, while, for instance, in the Baltic states and in Poland and in Baltic states, we are talking now about that it should be less intervention because it's too much. So it's, like the balance, the different challenges we face. You face the challenge of under intervention, and we we face the challenge of too much intervention and too much of regulation. But this is for the finalization of our discussion. Thank you so much, Ines. And let's move to our last speaker today, Professor Piero Sara from Macerata University. And we already heard very nicely the word nostalgia. I was sure that by the time we will be finalizing third speaker, there would be word nostalgia, but thanks to the team, we have Sylvia as an expert of nostalgia, who would be able, to elaborate more. What is the role of nostalgia in memory studies? What is the link between memory and nostalgia? Maybe all memory is nostalgia, and we want to remember. That's why we want to remember good things and don't want to remember bad things, because nostalgia or nostalgia, I don't know, nostalgia. Nevertheless, it's a feeling, a positive feeling, like something good happened and I want it to be repeated. Yes, we don't have nostalgia about bad things, I think. Yes, am I right or am I wrong? So now the floor is for Sylvia, and I'm sure we will have the answers. Go ahead.
Thank you very much, and good evening and welcome everybody. First of all, I would like to thank the Memory Study Association for having me here, our cluster leader, our excellent cluster leader, Dovile, and my colleagues who spoke before me for their illuminating and thought-provoking speeches. So thank you very much. Let me do my job and highlight, firstly, the fact that in our studies, our philosophical and ethical studies, nostalgia or nostalgia in Italian, or nostalgia, is considered as a feeling and precisely as an emotional or affective tonality. So we cannot judge a feeling, but we have to ethically judge the use we do with this term and this feeling, both in a personal and in a collective sense. Let me start with a short story, because nostalgia, the word nostalgia, was coined at the end of the 17th century by a physician, Johannes Hofer, who deemed nostalgia as a disease, a pathology, that affected soldiers far from home, ultimately leaving them without the force to live and go on. So nostalgia gradual acquisition of a sense of ambivalence and possibility can be traced back to different time periods. However, in more modern times, especially in the 17th and 18th centuries up to Romanticism, this collective or personal feeling was the counterpoint to a linear and rational vision of history and progress. Nostalgia has recently been defined as modernity's shadow, or coming back to Svetlana Boym, as one of the side effects of the teleology of progress. During the Enlightenment, nostalgia was considered to be an illness that stopped or slowed the march of progress. During the Romantic period, nostalgia was revived by poets and philosophers, of course, to refer to the tension toward infinitude, origins, and authenticity. The German Sehnsucht. It can be traced back to a tension, a desire described and experienced by Romantic philosophers. For instance, Novalis, who felt nostalgia for the infinite in the sense that they wished for it, but were simultaneously aware that such a dimension was not reachable, it was impossible to reach, and provoked suffering. Between Johannes Hofer and the Romantics, Immanuel Kant recognized that nostalgia does not deal with a particular place or space, but rather with time, unavoidably lost time. He viewed it as a dangerous pathology that makes us remember the past as much better than it actually was. For Kant, nostalgia is analogous to Schwärmerei. So, almost all scholars recognize the bond between nostalgia and memory. And the ethical political implication of nostalgia concern the way memory is understood and its relationship with history. Maybe we could list at least 3 types of interaction between nostalgia and memory. First, nostalgia can invent memories by longing for the past and trying to repeat it, to come back to it, thereby hindering memory by forcing repetition. Emergent pain calls for returning, reopening the past, and resuming interrupted past, not to redeem, but to imagine a future free from suffering and injustice. So, if we imagine nostalgia as a wish to come back and to repeat, we have to do with a restorative nostalgia, nostalgia for the identical. If we mean nostalgia as a feeling which intends to reopen the past in search for unaccomplished paths, subaltern memories, then we can use nostalgia and orient it toward the future. Finally, a happy nostalgia looks back to the past and reaffirms a sense of belonging that transcends geographical boundaries. This relationship between memory and nostalgia helps us understand the question of possession. An object can be recovered, but people, relationships, and time cannot. That is, to belong is the opposite than to possess. By referring to the work of memory, nostalgia can act also as a connective feeling. A connective feeling which is very useful and which is able or can be able to find facts that remained not listened to, not recorded, not quoted in the archives. So we can limit nostalgia in the sense that nostalgia can be too much linked to rigid identities. But we can use a meaning of nostalgia which is reflective and which can help our memories. Nostalgia can activate memories and can go back to the past in order to build counter memories, resistance, and the possibility of transformation. Even in the case of nostalgia, which is used in order to hope and to open up our futures, we have to be very attentive because we always need to come back to the historical facts and compare our feelings with the historical facts. So nostalgia is a feeling. It is related with memory. We can use it to reproduce past. We can use it to learn from the past, and so not to repeat the tragedies of the past. And we can use it in order to imagine other futures, other non-identical futures. And so maybe nostalgia can act as a trigger for subaltern memories and to build, as Giuseppina said, different archives, alternative archives.
Thank you. If can I have a follow-up question? Because
Yeah, of course.
Professor Pirosara, I heard so many nice keywords. I wrote them then down because I am sure I will use them in the future with your authorship. But my follow-up question is, can nostalgia be manipulated?
Yeah, of course.
Yes, and maybe the next question is how to prevent manipulation with nostalgia, because it can be dangerous, I assume,
Yes.
or not? Yes?
Yes, of course.
So how to make nostalgia work to positive change instead of manipulation and some negative shifts? What do you think about that?
Thank you very much. So a brief analysis of the usages of nostalgia in political science and in political philosophy reveals that nostalgia is frequently associated with regressive sentiment, political conservatism, restoration and reactionary views and policies. It is also endemic to populism. In a recent dictionary on social patience, edited by Gloria Origi, we read, and I quote, that the social dimension of nostalgic patience is one of the core elements of the populisms that are shaking up the 21st century political scene, end quote. So according to the social, political, and cultural analysis of many scholars, the feeling of nostalgia can be channeled and weaponized on a political level, since it is a very potent political motivator, maybe far more potent than hope. Because hopes can be disappointed, nostalgia is irrefutable. Similarly, the progenitor of which may be considered the restorative nostalgia, as I said previously, as coined by Svetlana Boym, nostalgia is also described as the feeling of an emotionally immature collective, which has never wanted to come to terms with otherness. That is, turning to a past as pristine as it is imagined, nostalgia looks back toward a state in which the negative, the other, and conflict do not exist. In this sense, the problem, and maybe the question, and the answer to your question, is the idea of the other and the coexistence with the other, and the coexistence with the absence. This is also something that we can apply to the past as well as to the future. And the rejection of the other also means the rejection of impermanence. The dichotomy between nostalgia and hope, in terms like those expressed by many authors, has also been pointed out in these terms. Hope is the opposite master frame, which is often associated with movements that build their identity around progressive narratives that embrace solidarity and diversity. So the consideration of nostalgia in its potential openness to the future appears to be a minority, of course, albeit a suggestive one, since it conveys the idea of a return to where one has never been, of a justice to be fulfilled without redemption through suffering, but by remembering the errors of history, trying not to repeat them. So the problem, and maybe the answer to your question, is the idea of identity. If I am nostalgic of an identity which never existed as such and as pure as we imagine, maybe we can turn nostalgia into a positive feeling. We can abandon this idea of identity and feel nostalgia for the non-identical, for some experience we haven't seen yet realized in history. And maybe the first generation of the critical theory of society knew this very well. I'm thinking to Horkheimer, but also to Benjamin. Conservative uses of nostalgia are tuned to a past that never happened as we remember it. They appeal to a golden age, fueled by rhetoric of the purity of the origins, of the sacredness of the roots, distorting memory and history in the service of xenophobia and racism. Conservative nostalgia has a real negative potential. And this is because the past is interpreted as a possession to be recovered in an identical manner to what has already happened. Its transience is not sufficiently considered, and it is intended to be repeated and changed. In this way, the work of memory is impeded because it recovers the past, but makes it alive in the present, thus noting similarities and differences between past and present situations.
Thank you. I am really taken away by the many ideas I heard from your presentation. And for instance, like nostalgia is considered to be a disease. Nostalgia is about the time lost, and that something is remembered much better than it really was. And get back to Albanian research, yes, even young people who never lived during the communist time, for some reason they want to bring it back because from the stories, from the narratives, somehow that period of time appears to be more hopeful, more and free of injustices than it really was. So really, thank you for connecting all of our presentations to one nice piece, because I feel that, nostalgia could be the cap of what we talked about today, or the roof of what we talked about today, and nicely combines all of us in one pot. But let us move now to the questions, because we have 10 minutes left, and I already opened the Q&A session. And let me publish the questions. Okay, I wanted to publish the questions and it disappeared. Let me get back to it. Okay, I will ask Katerina's help. Do you see that Q&A question, which was by Marielle in Q&A session? Because I think I pushed the wrong button and it disappeared. Maybe you can retype in a chat for everyone.
Yes, I see that.
Fantastic.
Yeah. It's published. Well, I think I can do it again. Yeah, give me a second.
Okay, give me a second.
Yeah. So maybe now, can you see the post? I just do it.
No, can you do that in a chat, please? Because I cannot see in Q&A, not anymore. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, no problem. Give me a second then. Okay, actually, I forgot that I turned off the chat for today's meeting. It's always, so I will read the question then. Yeah, no problem.
Do that.
Okay, so Marinelle, she
thank you for the opportunity to attend this valuable webinar. I have two questions, please. Can the right to truth be operationalized as a unifying legal principle in regional memory dialogues? This is the first one. And how does international human rights law mediate conflicts between competing historical narratives?
Thank you, Katerina, for vocalizing the question. And I think that's more or less legal question. I would forward that to Professor Tunchik. Have you heard that question very good, or do you want a repetition before
No,
replying?
I'm
Okay,
even
go
able
ahead.
to read that question because for me the Q&A is working. So,
Oh, okay, fantastic.
okay, so let's start with human rights law mediate conflict between competing historical narratives. I see, with full respect, I see the little contradiction between these two questions. So first of all, or we refer to the universalism and some form of universalism of human rights, and we treat the history as a objective and the objective tool of communication, or we refer to collective memory, or. So the problem is that maybe with human rights will be easier. I don't see such a potential, and it's even proven from the Baltic perspective. It was even proven by the Court of Human Rights, precisely in the country where I am now. So Ždanoka versus Latvia, the final decision of European Court of Human Rights was simple. Russians are lying. Ždanoka was a threat for democracy. Narratives presented by Latvians to justify some limitation of the passive electoral rights implemented against those who stayed in the federal structure of the Soviet Union after 13th of January 1991, so-called Riga's barricades events, are justified from the point of view of the Court of Human Rights. There was no collective agreement. There were separate voices, among others, the Judge Pancic from Slovenia. But no, human rights, in my opinion, human rights language, human rights are not the platform for memory narratives or universalism or national memories. Regarding right to truth, let's go far away from the Baltics, more to the western south and to this very nice place in mountains named Basque Country. Years ago, like 10 or 12 years ago, mainly the Basque Nationalist Party, which is controlling the Basque autonomy, for years in coalitions or not, they've been looking in right to truth and to the right to truth and right for truth as and attempt to recognize it as a human right to act precisely to bypass the Spanish policies of forgetting. Of course, it was 2007, it was post-Zapatero, it was after the first historical memory law, but much before the second memory law, which was adopted now by few years ago by Pedro Sanchez government, so law on democratic memory in Spain. And then in this looking and this referring to the language of human rights and the right for truth was precisely used instrumentally to strengthen the Basque agenda and to bypass the cross-Spanish policies of forgetting after the post-Franco transition. So unifying principle in the regional memory dialogue? Yes. However, if there is agreement about the facts.
Oh, that could be a tricky part because facts can be also, misleading and manipulated, and all of
Precisely,
these.
yes. That's what I'm
Yes.
saying. That I would like to say it's very nice and very noble and has a high potential for universalization of historical and memory dispute. However, I don't see in contemporary world, I don't see any room for that.
Yeah, and because the right for truth is also the matter of law. I mean, for centuries, societies, statehoods, they were inventing law precisely to decide who is guilty, who is not, who is right, and who is wrong. And even legal procedures, there is no such thing like objective truth. Yeah, there is a process of evidence, how much evidence you can provide and how much you can base what your alibi on what you are saying on how much evidences. So this is like very, very controversial aim to have a historical truth. And in my opinion, also, I would agree with Philip that it would be nice probably, but then again we would have challenges with the feeling of belonging, with different understandings of the same events, and that could be also that universalism is not reachable at the moment. I would like because we don't have any more questions in Q&A section, and now I can see some movement to Giuseppina. Yes, I wanted actually Giuseppina to get back to you, because I wanted you also, because you talked the first and you also heard the whole conversation. I would like to finalize our meeting with the wrapping up remarks, and my question would be the same for all of you. And we will do the same round as we did before, starting with Giuseppina, about what are, in your view, the shared challenges across the regions between Baltics and Mediterranean in memory field? What do you see are the shared challenges we could work on that together, or research that together, to make a positive change in that field? So, Giuseppina, several minutes for you. What are the shared challenges?
Thank you for
What do
this
you think?
very, very deep question, and very complicated, because I think it would need a very long time, which unfortunately we do not have in this session, and perhaps we can also build another seminar up. First of all, I would just let you add one remark about the Great Russia, which we were talking about before, because I did not want to say that in the framework of Russian emigration literature, all the writers have talked about Great Russia. So in an imperial view, because otherwise we would just displace the literary history, especially in the framework of Russian immigration literature, because of course there were some authors who had a particular, like Bunin, a particular, let's say, monarchical view, and even though they emigrated, but there were other writers, other artists who did not share this imperial perspective, also in the framework of the Russian immigration literature, and also in the framework of the literary dissent. So they had a completely different view. And that is the reason why I think that one of the main elements which can be shared in this very huge and very wide cultural space from the Baltic to the Mediterranean is, of course, the term of democracy, and the search of democracy, and the quest of democracy. So the quest also of identity, and a shared identity on the basis of a shared past. That is the reason why I think it is pretty challenging to how to find this sharing values, because if we think about the European Union, we had a very huge, a very large number of countries, but we have been talking about integration since the very beginning of the history of the European Union. But let's think about the real concrete integration among all the countries. So to have sharing values, we have to build these sharing values up. So we have to share this common cultural history. And I think that, of course, we do have, especially in the field of questing of and quest of democracy, and quest of also like a sharing past. But we have also to be, let's say, honest with ourselves. That is to say, do we know the history and also the memorial values of each country which is part of the European Union? Because I think this is one of the main crucial points. So if we talk about integration, we have to know the history of each nation, each country, which, talking about the European Union, belongs to the European Union. Starting from the public education. So Philip was referring before about education, and about this, that was my question to Philip, and perhaps we do have time to do that. But if we, or if anyway, each state imposes like a collective memory in this top-down process, of course we have to pay attention to the all sharing values. And so I think that we have a very long path, a very long way in front of us, because I'm not so sure that talking about the cultural integration, all the European countries like have been sharing values, especially because when we met in September, we were talking about the Eastern European countries, the Western European countries, and Philip provocatively said, Poland is not an Eastern European country. So, I mean, we have to think about culturally on each national past, and also of those countries which joined to the European Union recently. And recently, I mean, also 25 years ago, 20 years ago. So I think that we have to work a lot on this topic.
Thank you so much, Giuseppina. I don't want to use space for myself. Now I'm giving the word for Philip. Philip, shared challenges in the region between Baltics and Mediterranean in 2 sentences.
European memory agenda, it is possible and it was visible before the enlargement, so all the forms of reconciliation. Moreover, I don't see that contradictory memories about some concrete events, they might be obstacle for even federalization. Look at United States. I don't think that Tennessee is sharing the same collective memory about the Civil War with Maine or Pennsylvania. So, and I don't know, the monuments of General Lee been present in Texas even 10 years ago at the university campuses. So this contradiction, communication, and critical junctures creating the common memory narratives. Contradictions are not the big obstacle. End of the story.
Thank you so much. Now, Ines, go ahead. Shared challenges between Baltic and Mediterranean in 2 sentences.
Yes, I mostly agree with Professor Giuseppina about Europeanization and European integration process, since, let's say, Southeast Europe memory is not settled history, but it's still a very active political field, let's say, shaped by power and institutional weakness and competing narratives. And let's say we are deeply connected to the European integration. But let's say whether societies, and this is a shared insight and shared historical puzzle between Baltic states and Western Balkan states. So whether societies of ours are grappling with Soviet occupation, fascism, communism, civil war, dictatorship, etc., the differences are in content matters, but the political, of course, and institutional dilemmas of dealing with the past often rhyme. So one of the first challenges or shared challenges might be the competing victimhood and memory debates within the memory debate. So memory debates frequently are involved into contests who counts as the primary victim of history, occupation versus collaboration, or war versus repression, or communist crimes versus anti-fascist legitimacy. Another problem might be of politicization and instrumentalization. So let's say the institutions created to address the past, which should be truth commissions, museums, illustration laws, vetting mechanisms, are often repurposed as instruments of present-day political competition. And this might be a shared insight. And another shared dilemma would be about Europeanization, maybe a gap between procedural compliance and social meaning. So even for us in the Western Balkans, European Union integration might be mostly within boundaries or framework of rule of law, state building, etc., but not, let's say, much or more focused on our past, on healing with the past or dealing with the past. So Europeanization has undoubtedly contributed to this strengthening of legal frameworks, but yet it has been far less effective in generating shared narratives or moral consensus that we needed. And the last, we have always said that or even in literature, and then the critics of transitional justice have highlighted the fact that transitional justice has not linear models, and linear models on this field of study do not travel well, which means that the assumption that societies move smoothly from truth to justice reconciliation rarely holds in context marked by layered transitions and political fragility like in the Western Balkan countries. So sequencing is contingent, contested, and deeply political. So this, I think, that might be the shared challenges and shared insights between the two countries.
Thank you so much. And
Regions.
now, thank you so much. And I'm giving the final word also for Sylvia. What is, in your view, the biggest shared challenge between Baltics and Mediterranean from what we heard today?
Maybe we have to come to terms with our ideas of identity and boundaries. And we should use our pasts, a plural word, not a singular word, in order to imagine different futures together.
Thank you so much for these final wrap-up words. They sounded very nice. Let me just thank you again for being together here with the team and also with the audience who stayed actually with us the whole time. And I just want to wrap up with one last sentence that really, if we want to come together, if we want to be together and to create something together, we need to do our homework. Each country needs to do homework, like Lithuania, Poland, Albania, Italy. We need to do homework. And this homework, to do this homework is usually very hard because we need not only to memorize our traumas and to expand our victimhood, but also to face the traumas which are unpleasant and are telling that something not very positive about ourselves. So I think the way to collaboration and to unity and to European identity is doing the homework in each country. And I hope that we can finalize with this hopeful note that it is possible to do the homework in each country. That's what we are actually doing, each academic in our countries. So thank you so much again. Thank you, Memory Studies Association, for this hosting of our conversation. And let's hope to see each other in other venues. Have a nice week, not week, night and week.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you very much.
Bye,
Thank you
bye.
so
Thank
much.
you.
Nice day.
Thank you.